Okay, so thank you everybody for joining us on your Wednesday lunch hour. I do appreciate Nalini from Madagascar. Thank you for making the time. Today we're going to be speaking about strategic sourcing. This is going to be at 10,000 foot level. It's really high level, but it is part of our supply chain series. We do want to start off with the beginning on the strategic sourcing model that we have internally. And we're going to set some high-level points, and hope you enjoy it. If you have any questions, please feel free to use drop them off in the question box, and I will get to it at the end of the webinar. Additionally, we have some poll questions that I'm going to push forward in the next couple minutes. It is those three little triangle, square, and circle. If you click that, you would see option for polls. And that's where I will be releasing the questions. So let's get started. And let's get started with a poll. The first question we have, and it should be on your screens right now, is how would you define strategic sourcing? And there's a list of options there. So if you could just take a couple minutes, go ahead. Let me know what you think. Okay, we have one vote so far. Okay, so we'll just continue on. I've launched two more questions that we have, and then I'm going to come back to the questions itself, and then we'll speak to the questions for a couple minutes before we continue on with the presentation. The second question is: procurement interacts with all functions of an organization. What do you guys think?
I think that's true.
Fantastic. And then the final question we have is: procurement invents roadblocks so that I don't get what I want quickly. I love this question because when I get a whole bunch of falses, it means that people are primarily from the procurement world. And when I do this on operational sites, you're absolutely right. You know, they make our life miserable with the roadblocks. But it's a fun question. It's an interesting question because to deep dive into this one first, the procurement organization exists within the same, I guess, it's part of the same the larger corporation, but the rules differ so greatly with buying as opposed to consuming. It often feels like, you know, there's this competition in terms of I need this to produce, and procurement is saying, but I have rules to follow. And when those aren't married, or there's a disparity between them, oftentimes it leads to conflict. Even though, you know, to be quite fair, procurement is a support function. So the primary role is of the operations, and it is to support the operations. But depending on what rules you have within the procurement world, I can either move quickly or pretty slowly. This is where strategic sourcing is where I'm going to speak to the concept, is sort of a key and fundamental in making sure that we move quickly with intent. So let me just go back a couple of slides and say, how do you define strategic sourcing? What was the first vote we got? Is a couple of votes. It is buying with a plan and with intent. That is absolutely true. Strategic sourcing spends a lot of time on the planning side to plan out the acquisition process, the type of process to use, whether it's direct negotiation, request for proposal, a reverse auction, an auction, depending on multitude of activities. It also speaks to what kind of negotiation strategy that I want to employ based on market research, what my strengths are, where am I lacking, and what kind of eventually what kind of contract do I really want that would help me succeed. It is, it is when you say buying with intent, you've identified all your needs and the best case scenario for your organization. This takes time, and that is the key thing with strategic sourcing. It takes time to get it right, but it's sort of, it's like a routine that you build up. When you do a certain list of activities, you do get more efficient with them, and you can quickly realize where you're spending too much time without value and where you're actually getting value for the time that you spend. Strategic source, the second, I guess we got one vote on strategic sourcing is about always conducting RFPs and getting the cheapest deal. Not necessarily, not always. It depends on the category that you have and you're buying. Sometimes it is about getting the cheapest deal because it is a common item. I'm going to pick on office supplies here and say I want, paper for my printer. A paper from Grand & Toy and a paper from Office Depot, there's likely very little difference between the two. So at that point, you would be saying, I want the cheapest price. But if I'm going to be using operation raw materials, those could differ hugely in terms of specs, packaging, how they're stored, their shelf life. And at that point, the cheapest price could really harm your organization. The second question that we're going to speak to is interacts with all functions of an organization. That is absolutely true. From demand planning all the way to paying, procurement plays a central role where you're talking about the requisition, processing the requisition, converting that into a PO, and then having that invoice paid. It's sort of central with a relationship to the outside world. And you do interact with every sort of finance, HR, and operations. You do interact with every piece of the puzzle there that make up the company. So moving on to the actual presentation. When you talk about strategic sourcing and you talk about strategy, where exactly does strategy sit? Strategy sits at the top of the pile. It is your vision of what you would like for your procurement organization. This is what I want to achieve, and it is in line with the mission and vision of my company. This is the ideal state. Now, below the strategy, you have your plan. You say, how do I get to my ideal state? Well, this is the list of plans I have. These are sourcings I need to do. These are sourcings that can defer to next year, or these are sourcings that are not really strategic sourcings. Maybe they're tactical. Maybe I just need to keep buying the same way I have been buying. There's a plan associated. And then below the plan, you have the tactics and how to achieve the plan. Now, you can have the best strategy, the best plan, the best tactics if you have no way to measure control, either through lagging indicators in terms of spend or through invoices on hold, like finance indicators or deliveries on time in full. You have no way to measure that you're actually being successful according to the strategy you have. So strategy sits at the top. It is what helps guide the organization towards the common goal, right? And then the core pillars, what we speak to as core pillars, we talk about strategy, service, and cost. So we spoke about strategy. Service is what I'm going to be providing to my organization, as well as how am I going to be treating the world of vendors, my suppliers, my supply partners, who I depend on to get me the material I need to do the job that I need to do. And then finally, the cost is you build a war chest. You want to manage the money as you would yourself. How do I get it to the best value? That may be the cheapest. That may not be the cheapest. But in the grand scheme of things, you're looking at the total value. The total cost of ownership is how I would speak to it, and how I guess is one of the methods to evaluate whether a contract is good or not. Now, you don't do TCO analysis on everything. There are certain categories you do, and there are other categories that maybe a different analysis method would be required. Okay. Now, when we move to strategic versus tactical, like I said, strategic is about spend with a purpose. You define the strategy, you qualify suppliers, you do contract negotiations, management, you manage demand. It's a continuous process on a higher level, as opposed to tactical or operational procurement, where you're already behind the 8 ball by the time the requisition comes in. Once a requisition comes in, you're chasing the wheel and getting materials. Now, this is a little different maybe in capital procurement or in services where you need a requisition to start the process. And therefore, at that point, even I would argue that if you can sit down with the stakeholders and get an idea on what kind of services they need in the coming year, you'll be better placed than actually waiting for a requisition to come in. Speaking specifically to material procurement, as soon as you get a requisition, the clock is ticking, because the person who put the requisition is, I need this. So now you're chasing it. Now you're saying, how do I get the best price? Am I able to get the price, or do I really need to move this along into an emergency? Because the cost of not having the product is insignificant compared to the cost of me doing business. So you get into a bit of a battle. But the strategic side of it, you're trying to look at your spend, you're trying to look at your operations, sit down with your stakeholders and plan, 1, 2, 3, 5 years out, depending on the type of category you have, depending on the type of suppliers you have. You want to be able to be with intent. You want to have intent, you want to spend with a purpose, and you want to be able to budget that out over a number of years to really maximize the contract, maximize your dollar, and take full advantage of your supplier as well. What I do like to say here when we're speaking about strategic and tactical is, your business. The supplier knows their business. Use them, leverage them to get to a point where your operational cycle is stress-free, is event-free. There's no fires. You aren't chasing POs and requisitions. It's on a drumbeat basis. And from here, we talked about strategy, we talked about procurement, the strategic and the tactical side. And then we talk about types of procurement. When we talk about strategic procurement, your outcome would be any 3 of these types. So you could have a traditional, which is, this is my need, these are specs, do you meet it? Can you meet it? We could talk about value-based. And you think this is what I hope to get from the sourcing that I'm doing. The outcome is, I don't know how to get to where I need to get to, Mr. Supplier. You're the best placed to tell me how to get to my end result. I want the quality. I want to be within budget. I want to have these are my must-haves. Tell me how you get there. And all 3 types of procurement could be part of strategic procurement. It all depends on the work you do in the planning phase to give you an idea on towards the end on what type of procurement activity do you really need to do. Okay. And once you've determined that, there is sort of what we call pathways to success. And there's a list of activities that you have to do. Each stage has a list which defines an ideal outcome. And it's about putting control over the variability that eventually does happen within a request for proposal, a direct negotiation, or an auction. Anything that you can, all activities that you can do to prevent variability would be ideal for you and your business when it comes to making the right decision. So we have a few pathways here. We summarize them. Obviously, there's a list of activities that occur between under each of these bullets. So we have category strategy, which includes market analysis. We have negotiations, so preparing for the negotiation, preparing for your list of must-haves, nice-to-haves, and you really don't care about. You need to have that identified. Contract award is what is the ideal state in terms of, is it this 100-page legal document, or a 5-page legal document would do with these lists of supporting. And then I guess I need to bold this multiple times, is you could have the best strategy, the best negotiation, and the best piece of paper that you've signed. Without implementing it correctly, the value is lost. It's only on paper at that point. So contract implementation is one of the key ways of measuring success. And then sustainability. Sustainability is what we now have as dashboards, where you look at contract compliance, and you look at contract usage, and you look at the metrics associated with your contract, and saying, how is everything working? If there are any fires, or if something has changed, this is where you'd be able to see it. This is where you'd be able to adjust. So you're not holding on to, this didn't work out for me until the end of the contract. You are able to change within, and that that plays a huge role within your supplier relationship as well. I do to keep speaking to a little bit, everybody wants to do well in the role that they play, including the suppliers. They value your business, and you value them when they do a good job, because at the end of the day, it's about streamlining our operations and being successful together. So let's go through in terms of a little deeper into the pathways. We have a category strategy. Within the category strategy, we have spend analysis, bid sheet preparation, a BATNA, which is best alternative to a negotiated agreement, negotiation strategy, market intelligence. Now, these are not the specific orders. You can have them in multiple ways, but the ideal state, when you have to spend a greater time in the planning phase than you spend in the outcome phase. The more time you spend planning out for example, your bid sheet, you'll have less time explaining to your vendors on how to bid on the job. Less addendums, less maybe extensions on the RFPs. That's a greater time spent here will prevent time extension on the back end. The ideal state when we talk about strategic sourcing and the ability to do effective category strategy is the agreements expire when you want them to expire, and as such, you have time to plan and act. This goes back to that original thought process, is buying with intent, looking at your agreements ahead of time and saying which ones do they really, how many of them do they need a category strategy, and within the category strategy, what's the number that require market intelligence or a detailed spend analysis, and is the bid sheet really complicated or the bid sheet simple? So you have to spend that time in the front end to be able to drive value on the back end. The second, as an outcome of doing the category strategy, you would highlight one of these activities or a different activity. The planning phase will highlight the most successful outcome. If you're going for office supplies, you might just do a request for quotation and saying, here's the list, here's the list of pens and pencils and paper and notebooks that I need, give me the cheapest price. Or you could go with something that is very valuable in terms of I guess in our services category, builders, or some trades that we are looking at. At that time, you might need a different approach to satisfy the need of your business. And that might be the best value, that might not be the cheapest, but might be the best value for you as an organization. And then we move from the category strategy to the negotiation step. And these charts are, I'm sure we're familiar with these charts. These charts aren't new. They've been around for a long time. But it is important to prepare and identify where you are in the bottom chart, the negotiation style, on where you think your organization is within the market. Are you somebody who takes prices, or are you somebody who gives prices, which will then determine the type of negotiation style you have? And one of the key things to negotiating is time. You can't let too much time pass between proposal 1, proposal 2, feedback, and going through the routine. This is where you spend a lot of time in the front end, understanding your drivers, your cost, your terms, your risk, and you're able to move quickly with the partners that you want to be negotiating with. Adding momentum to a process in this phase oftentimes leads to a better, I guess, a fuzzy feeling between yourself and the supplier to get to a better outcome. Obviously, you're representing your company, they're representing theirs. You both have goals associated, but that doesn't mean that if you give them the time, if you give them the respect, if you give them the focus, they won't come back and give you a better deal. And then we move over to contract award. So this is where we talk about that general terms and conditions, the commercial conditions, templates that you have, the scope of work with the technical documents. This formal package seals the deal, signs it, saying this is what we've committed to, both of us. This is what you're going to give me. This is how I'm going to reimburse you or compensate you for your services. And the best practice after this step, and it's easy to forget, is to send a regret letter to people who participated but weren't awarded the business. This keeps them engaged. Obviously, they've asked for feedback. I would say that you should be able to give them some feedback on their performance, but sending them a letter at the end that says, unfortunately, you weren't successful, and let's talk about where you need to improve. will give you a better outcome in the next phase of the contracting phase. So the next time they may come back with a stronger proposal. Like I mentioned, up until here, it's great. Everything is happening on paper and spreadsheets, and we're having these discussions. And it comes time to implement it, and this is where you win or lose truly at the operational base of it. You're implementing a follow-up routine immediately after the contract is awarded, and you have done the kickoff. You have the checkpoints, the contract handover, the feedback, all of that. When you set up that routine, allows you to maximize the outcome and prevent, frustrations from building up through the life of a contract. This is really key in maintaining that relationship and maintaining the success for your organization as well. So we spoke about the pathways to success. We spoke about strategy. We spoke about procurement. This is sort of at a very high level on what it would take for you to get to from the first step, which is the procurement, actually buying till the end. Now, there are many other steps that will happen that need to be spoken to. They were part of subject to additional supply chain webinars that we have planned. But to wrap up the session we have today, we want to talk about strategic sourcing and how do we define it. It is the ideal state is to buy with intent and to spend as much time as we possibly can on the planning phase. If you plan correctly, if you plan with intent, you'll have tremendous success and better contracts. For you, it feels good when you're successful, your organization is successful, you can see the supplier adding value. As a professional, that is also a great feeling, and it's a great learning as well. If you do it, spend the amount of time learning the process, learning your product, learning the organization, learning the supplier, it adds to your knowledge base, and no matter where you go, you take that knowledge with you. So to summarize our analyze and improve approach, we provide a customized approach to understanding and solving issues. Part of this journey is to understand what phase your operation is in. So like I said, the strategic sourcing is part of the larger supply chain world. It's part of other activities. And our strategic sourcing module, which is I've given you a sort of small piece of in this presentation, is part of one of our training courses and part of a toolkit we use to drive improvement and success with our clients. These tools and the module and the trainings vary greatly depending on your phase. And I will have a final poll question. And with that, I'm going to go into the Q&A that we would have. So let's launch this. And let's open it up. I know we only have 5 minutes left. Let me go here. Let's see.
Shafi, I think some of us, including me, put our questions in the message board. So in case you want to look at it there.
Fair enough. Jason plan. Yes, that is correct. That is a good definition of strategic sourcing, Jason. You're absolutely correct. There's no one set definition, right? But the overall theme of it is I want to be able to plan, and I want to be able to meet the needs that I have, as opposed to chase the wheel. That's the larger aspects. Carmen, you say, how formal does the strategy need to be required? It depends on. It certainly does depend on what you're buying. So if it is a capital project, if you're going to be installing, say, a building, you're going to be construction related with trades, you want that to be a detailed document segmenting. But if it is something that is a commodity that you're buying, say you're buying rebar, for example, it doesn't have to be a massive page document. You could have the entire category strategy built into a single page, which it forces you to plan out the way you want to buy and plan out the suppliers that you want to invite. And do you have that documentation? Do you have the demand? Do you have your bid sheet set out and specs? I know when I was looking at, it's a mining example, when we were looking at ground support, and we had to say, okay, let's go out for ground support, and we may have to do corrosion testing. When we asked that question about corrosion testing, we were like, so what are the standards, internal standards? And the answer we got is, oh, I don't think we have those formalized. So immediately we were like, okay, I can't go out to the market and ask people to give me something or pricing on or specs when I myself can't define it for you. So it puts it right in the front. Now, I did this about 1.5 years before the contract expired, so it gave me a lot of lead time to make sure that I was able to be successful. But it forces you to ask those questions.
Thank you.
And then you say interesting comment, is the material being presented? Yes, we can have it available for you. No issues. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, let me just check the other Q&A. Well, thank you for voting on the poll. Do you enjoy the webinar? That's great. And that's it. That's the end of this webinar. If there's any other questions, please feel to reach out. You have contact@analyzeandimprove.com. My email, shafi@analyzeandimprove.com. You have Carmen's email as well. Please feel free to reach out to us directly, and we'd be happy to answer the questions or provide any other answers that you like.
Thank you, Shafi.
Thanks.
you.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Okay.